Screen done properly. Right. All the technology, get all the technology lined up. And I really drives me a little bit crazy, the technology, but I think I recently graduated from Kita Gimel to Kita Dalet. You know, I'm getting there slowly. You know, sort of I've learned how to do new tricks with various bits on my computer. So I believe I'm now in Kita Dalet, which is not bad. You know, fourth grade, pretty good. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, lovely to see you all. And good morning, Malcolm. Nice to see you, Malcolm. Good morning. Always nice to see you. I understand you come on the screen in order to see Debbie, not to see me. I realize that. But there it is. I'm also here.
Not true. Always a pleasure to see you.
Only in jest. Please God, every day in Israel we need another layer of special siyata d'shmaya, living under kanfei hashchina, as one government disappears off the face of the earth, and another one, who knows what the next one will look like. Very, very soon. I think that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is only doing this to us, one government after the other, each one less competent than the previous one, only to show us that we're living tachas kanfei hashchina, that really we're not living, that the successes and the strength of Klal Yisrael is not derived from leadership. No one can make the mistake and think that our successes are derived from good leadership. No one can even think that.
It's still better than tachas kanfei Boris.
Yes, that's certainly true. Well, we're living sort of, yes. Eini Hashem Elokecha boi mereishis hashana ad acharis shana, says the pasuk in Dvarim. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu cares for Eretz Yisrael from the first day to the last day of the year. And certainly that's the hashgacha pratis of this country, that the country is booming and Baruch Hashem secure, not because of its leadership, but despite the leadership. When you have a government that hates some of their colleagues more than they hate our worst enemies, so you have a really upside down world. And please God, we'll get a better one next time. Please God, we'll see. Anyhow, I'm not an expert on politics. I haven't actually met anybody yet who is. I'm not sure there is any expertise on Israeli politics. You just got to take it day by day and see, try and survive. Okay, well, we are learning together Chumash, we're learning together Torah, and clearly that is the most worthwhile activity that we have in our lives, right? The Talmud Torah, Keneged Kulam. The Mishnah lists all sorts of the most wonderful mitzvahs and says Talmud Torah actually is the key. It's the key. Keneged Kulam means several things. It means that, in a sense, it's equivalent to all the other mitzvahs, and it also means that it leads to all the other mitzvahs. The more one learns Torah, the more one realizes that there are so many mitzvahs around. And we are actually in Bereshis, Parshas Lech Lecha, chapter 17, which is a famous chapter, famous in the sense that this is the moment, this is the chapter that Avram gets the mitzvah of the Bris Mila, arguably one of the most famous mitzvahs of the entire Tanakh is the Bris Mila. And it's with this Bris Mila that actually Am Yisrael is created. The creation of Klal Yisrael, the creation of the Jewish people enabled them to later on stand at Har Sinai and to go on to Eretz Yisrael. All this, the key is in Sefer Bereshis. The key are the events that took place in chapter 17 in Lech Lecha, where Avram Avinu gets the Bris Mila. I'd like to point out, first of all, that the Bris Mila, the actual circumcision itself that Avram does at the age of 99, so you'll appreciate that a Bris Mila at the age of 99 is no small matter. And in actual fact, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos speaks about Ba'asara Nisyonos, Nisnasa Avraham Avinu. Avraham was tested 10 times. 10 times he had a major nisayon. Now the truth is we have nisyonos every day. Every decision we make and every situation we're in, at some level, is a nisayon. It's testing our ability, our emunah, testing our midas. We're being tested constantly. But Avraham Avinu had mega nisyonot, had moments in his life which were extremely, extremely hard and difficult, and other humans, other people might have faltered. And the Bris Mila is one of them, because the Bris Mila actually is given to Avraham as a sign of the covenant with Avraham, with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but no reason is given for the Bris Mila. We don't know why the Bris Mila is the way it is, and it's considered to be a chayk. In fact, many of you have been at a Bris Mila, and I don't know, everybody, I don't know how many people are listening when the officiating rabbi says the bracha over a cup of wine. But the bracha that he makes over a cup of wine, anybody know what the bracha is? What is the bracha that is being made? Not the bracha made by the male, and not the bracha made by the father of the baby, but the bracha that is made by over a cup of wine, usually by the officiating rabbi, or by sometimes the moel himself. What are the first few words of that bracha? Anybody know? You've probably heard it 100 times, but it's different. It's not one of those brachas that you say, you know. I mean, I've memorized it over the years, because Baruch Hashem at Ner Yisrael, it was probably one of the most frequent simchas that we had were bris milas. And I keep here in Eretz Yisrael, I keep meeting young men, young adults, or people who tell me that I was officiated at their bris milah. But the bracha starts, and this bracha is relevant to the chapter of Bereshis that we're about to see. So the bracha starts off, Asher Kidesh Yedid Mi Better. Asher Kidesh Yedid Mi Better. So what does that mean? So it's the Yedid Hashem, the so to speak, the friend of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a beautiful, beautiful word, Yedid, right? It's used in modern Hebrew as well. Yedidim are friends. Yedid, but there's somebody who's being referred to here as the friend of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In fact, this name appears later on in the Tanakh with Shlomo HaMelech, who is referred to as Yedidya. Yedidya is the friend of God, right? But Yitzchok is the first person referred to as Yedid Hashem. Asher Kidesh Yedid Mi Better. That Yitzchak was consecrated Mi Better. Mi Better means already in the uterus. In other words, before he came out into this world, he was conceived with Kadusha. Why was Yitzkop conceived with Kadusha? The point of this bracha is to refer to the fact that in the chapter of Chumash we're going to be looking at in a few moments, Avraham Avinu is told, in order to have that child, which will be the continuation of Am Yisrael, who turns out to be Yitzchak, in order to have that child, you need to have a bris milah before he's conceived. In other words, the bris milah was in many ways the hachana, was the preparation for Avraham Avinu and Sarah to conceive Yitzchak. Without the bris milah, they wouldn't have had that Kadusha, which could have brought someone like Yitzchak into the world. So in that sense, and of course the bris milah is physically connected to procreation, and only with the bris milah could Yitzchak come into this world. Contrast to, incidentally, we'll come back to this later on, contrast this to Yishmael. Yishmael is born to Avraham several years earlier, I think about 13 years earlier, and he is born before Avraham has a bris milah. So in other words, Yishmael is not born b'kedusha, but Yitzchak is born b'kedusha. Asher kidesh yedid mi beten. Mi beten, beten literally means the stomach, but here it's a reference to the uterus, that already within the uterus, he's already, before he came out of this world, meaning what? Before he decided how he was going to live his life, he was conceived in Kadusha, right? Leidosoi b'kedusha. He was conceived, horoso v'leidosoi b'kedusha. Not only his birth, but his conception already was with Kadusha because of the bris milah. And then the next line of the bracha is v'choik b'she'eroi som. These are a bit sort of difficult words, but the she'ero means his flesh, som means was placed, was put there, and choik is a reference to the bris milah. The bris milah itself is considered to be a choik. It's considered to be one of the chukim of the Torah, even though many generations do try and ascribe all sorts of benefits to the bris milah, but actually it remains for us a choik, and something which has no real rationale to it. It is simply a given. It's one of the givens of life. That Yitzchak is given two things. He's given Asher Kiddush Yididni Beten, that he's conceived with Kadusha of the bris milah, and the Chok B'She'ero Som, and the Chok is then placed on his body, So Yitzchak is the first person in the world to have a bris milah at the age of 8 days old, right? No, Avram didn't have it at 8 days old, and Yishmael didn't have it at 8 days old. But Yitzchak is the first one who is conceived and born into pure Kadusha, and he lives his life, a life of pure Kadusha. According to Chazal, that's one of the reasons that unlike Avram and Yaakov, he's not allowed to leave the land of Israel. And it's also one of the reasons why he actually qualifies for the Akedah to be a potential korban, because he's hektish. His whole life, the life of Yitzchak is hektish. The life of Yitzchak actually reflects innate sanctity more than Avram and Yaakov even, right? He's completely pure Kadusha. And that story starts here at the end of Lech Lecha, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Avraham Avinu that he's about to have a child. Let's have a look at a few psukim together, and then we'll take this a little bit further. But really, it's important to understand that with the birth of Yitzchak, we're laying the foundations for Klal Yisrael. Lots of the things that happened later on to the Jewish people happened because of the way Yitzchak was born and the type of person he was and how he came into the world. Incidentally, just in parenthesis here, we know less about Yitzchak than we know about Avram and Yaakov. In Sefer Bereshis, we get lots of stories about the achievements, the tefillos, the activities of Avram Avinu, and even more about the activities and the achievements and tefillos of Yaakov. And Yitzchak, in a sense, is the mystery man of Sefer Bereshis. It's important to know that he is like we speak about later on in history about Lamed Vov Tzadikim, the concept of a hidden tzaddik. That is really that concept was established by Yitzchak. Avram wasn't a hidden tzaddik. Avram was a world leader. Yaakov was a world leader, but Yitzchak was not. Yitzchak was somebody whose Kadusha was very intense, very innate, and didn't interact so much with the rest of the world. He wasn't a person who was giving speeches. He wasn't a headline of the newspapers. He wasn't a leader, what we would consider to be a leader. But he was an essential feature throughout the history of the Jewish people, incidentally. We've always had these two different types of spiritual leaders. Some Rabbonim are like major headline figures who are public speakers and community leaders and authors and politicians. I'm thinking, for example, of Rabbi Lau, Rabbi Yisrael Lau, right? The previous chief rabbi of Israel is a very prominent, powerful, leader type of Rav. And then there are other tzaddikim who are really, they live their lives privately and quietly, but nevertheless, they generate Kadusha. And that's really what's happening with Yitzchak. And the key to understanding Yitzchak is, in fact, the bris milah. And that's why the bracha that we make at every bris milah takes us back to Yitzchak. Asher Kiddush Yididni Beten. This is Yitzchak conceived already with Kadusha. Right? And on his flesh was imprinted this chayk, this mitzvah of the bris Mila. The Tze'etzah of Chosam Ba'os Bris Kodesh, and all some subsequent generations have inherited this bracha of the Ois Bris Kodesh. So let's have a look at a few psukim here. And let's see if I can find the text that I'm looking for. Nope. Okay, give me a minute. What do I say? Give me a minute. Let's try that again. Okay, can you see a text? Yes, good. Miracles. Okay, we've already looked at this passage before, but let's just get back into the topic. He's 99 years old. Right? So the first thing that's important to realize is that this name, El Shaddai, right? One of the Shemos HaKadoshim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Maybe we'll speak more about that in a few moments. The Hishalech Lefonai, we learned this Rashi before, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to him, walk in my ways, but he says, walk before me. A contrast to Noah, that's what we looked at last time. With Noah, it says, but he walked with God. I'm not going to go into that for the moment. But it's interesting, the Ramban here, I just learned a few lines here from the Ramban on the word El Shaddai, Shin Dalad Yud. Right? This is really the first time that we're being introduced to this name of HaKadosh Baruch. In the creation of the world, you have the name Elokim, you have Yud Kei Vav Kei, right? But you don't have El Shaddai until you have the Bris Mila, right? So the Ramban has got a very interesting line on this, which is really a subject for a whole Shia. Let's just read a few words of this Ramban. So he says, why are we mentioning here this name of God? This is the Shem HaKadosh Baruch Hu that works in this world in a hidden way. In other words, the Rambam throughout his commentary often refers to the fact that obviously there are many times that the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is apparent and evident and miraculous, but those are very rare occasions. In actual fact, the day-to-day life of Klal Yisrael is based on what he calls the Nisim Nistorim. And in fact, in our davening, we say at the end of every Shemona Esrei, we thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Al Nisecha Shebachol Yoim Imonu. Those Nisim which accompany us daily, that protect us from dangers, that give us life, that give us intelligence, that give us abilities to interact with good people and protect us from bad people. All that, if it was left to the laws of nature, Klal Yisrael would have ceased to exist a long time ago. Al Nisecha Shebachol Yoim Imonu, says the Ramban, the name El Shaddai refers to that quality. I'm reading here the second line of the Ramban, to keep them alive even in times of famine. Third line, just like the whole of Abraham's life. Right? So he says it's all, the Torah is full of what he calls the Nes Nista, a very important principle in the writings of the Ramban and in the Torah in general, right? There's avukulam nisim, avukulam tisnatzeach marechas amazolas. We have this idea of HaKadosh Baruch Hu looking after us miraculously, right? And it's interesting, he mentions this thing in the first line that I've highlighted, tisnatzeach marechas amazolas. We're able to overcome our muzzle. In other words, the natural predestiny of every individual and of Klal Yisrael as a whole, that we overcome that with the Nisim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but they're not miracles which are a break in the laws of nature. Like the Nissim created by Moshe Rabbeinu, right? The 10 plagues, Yamsuf, etc., etc., etc. That is, so this is really the secret of the name Shin Daled Yud, the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shin Daled Yud, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu guides us and protects us in a hidden way, in a non-miraculous way, but somehow filters filters out the dangerous effects which exist in the world, dangerous people, dangerous illnesses, dangerous disasters. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is able to protect us. Interestingly, that the minhag in Klal Yisrael, it's not a halacha, but it's a minhag which every single one of us follow, that when we have a mezuzah on the front door, we write Shin Daled Yud on the outside of the mezuzah. Right? Not on the inside where it's written the Shema, but on the outside, which you can see if you have a mezuzah that you can see through, we have Shin Daled Yud. And so it's this Shem Hashem, which we put on the mezuzah of the door. And the idea is that by doing this mitzvah, we are acknowledging that we're only able to build a house and protect the house and live in the house because of the hidden nissim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the hidden hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this world. And that is the Shin Daled Yud. We'll come back in a minute to other aspects of this name Shin Daled Yud because it's very important in chapter 17. Okay, the Sforno tells us something interesting about the word Veheyei Tamim. So here, right in the opening pasuk, Abraham is told, his halech lefonai Veheyei Tamim, and be tamim, and be pure, and be pure. I must say there's a bit of an ambiguity, a bit confusing for those people who are modern Hebrew speakers. Not all of us are modern Hebrew speakers, but for those who are modern Hebrew speakers, in modern Hebrew, the word tamim is actually not such a compliment. It's used in a different sort of way. When they say about somebody that is tamim, it means, does anybody know what does it mean in modern Hebrew? We say about someone that is tamim.
Simple.
What do you say?
Simple.
Yes, he's a simpleton. Or we say in English, a simpleton, meaning someone who is naive is called tamim. Someone who's not really thinking deeply about what's going on, but just is easily fooled and easily tricked is called very tamim, right? So that's the negative side of tamim. But that's not the way the word tamim is used in the Tanakh. Vayei tamim means complete. Onkelos translates tamim as shalem, right? Vayei shalem, and be shleimut, to become complete. In other words, at the moment you are incomplete. Once you've done the bris Mila, vayei tamim, you will become complete. In other words, this is an important moment in his life, to have the tamimus and to have that and in fact there's a pasuk, isn't there, in Vayikro, it says Tomim Tiyeh im Hashem Elokecha. So Tomim Tiyeh im Hashem Elokecha doesn't mean it's a mitzvah to be naive. I promise you, it is not a mitzvah to be naive. It's not a mitzvah to be a simpleton. One has to be careful, one has to be cautious, one has to think deeply about things, and naivete is not a virtue. But tamim is a virtue, because tamim means complete, and here it also is a reference to the idea that he has emunah tamima. He has complete emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he accepts the bris Mila with complete faith, with complete emunah. That's v'hayei tamim. So have a look here. So have a look here at the Sforno on the word v'hayei tamim. Very nice Sforno here. Just a few lines from the Sforno, one of the classic Rishonim on the Chumash. V'hayei tamim. It says the Sforno, ukenei hashleimus. By going through the bris Mila, that is the key for you acquiring that completion. Hashleimus ha'efsha lemin ha'enosh. the highest level of shleimus that a human being can attain. Haskel v'yodea osi, and that requires a deep knowledge and understanding of the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the ideas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the hashgacha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, b'yedias d'rochai u'v'hidamusra elai. And he emphasizes here that Sforno, the idea of being, this word here is a very interesting word. Let me just highlight this one word that I'm looking at. And does anybody want to know anything about this word? What do we mean when he says b'hidamusra elai? Anybody, any ideas on the words?
When you're compared to me.
Yes, to be compared comes from the word domeh. Domeh. Domeh means similar, and hidda muscha means to make yourself similar, right? And this is actually a subject for a whole shir or a whole series of shirim. What does the Torah mean when it says to become similar to God? Clearly, we can't become similar to God. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is infinite and we are finite, and you can't cross that boundary. Nevertheless, the Torah tells us v'holachta b'drachav, to follow in the paths of the virtues of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And here the Sforno says that's what he means by v'hayei tamim. And this is, so he says, ki omnam, so he says here, ki omnam p'ulas kol nimtza, Torah al tzirosa, yenos rachecha, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so basically he's saying that the Hayei Tamim, Avraham Avinu was told, first of all, it's a mitzvah. Secondly, it's the key to giving birth to Yitzkop, who is the foundation going forward of Klal Yisrael. And thirdly, for you personally, it's the moment of you achieving shleimus. So this was a major turning point in Avram's life. And here in this passage, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying that this is the covenant which will be kept throughout the generations forever. It's an interesting fact, actually, that even very non-observant Jews still have a connection to the Bris Milah, unless they're, of course, very much into sort of left-wing freedom, human rights. The human rights organizations are anti-Bris Milah. So you might be aware of this. If you ever come across any human rights organizations, they believe that Bris Milah is a breach of the human rights of the baby. The baby wasn't consulted. And here you are making something on the baby which is irreversible. You're changing the baby in a certain way without consulting him, right? But in actual fact, from the Torah point of view, that's exactly the mitzvah. The mitzvah of the Bris Milah is that the identity, Jewish identity, is something that we haven't chosen. We can choose to live according to it or not to live according to it. But the actual identity as a Jew is something which is hardwired into our existence, into the way we are born, the way we've come into this world. And with the exception of a ger or a giores, which is a separate topic, which we looked at last week, actually, generally speaking, the Bris Milah represents the idea that this is a given part of our identity. It's not something that we choose. It shouldn't be something that we choose. Nobody here has chosen to be Jewish. Right? What we have done is we've chosen to identify with our Jewish ancestry and to live accordingly. That is a bechira, that's an active choice. But the bris itself is imposed on us, right? And in fact, what is the bracha the father makes? The father, the Bris Milah says, that we're taking this baby and without asking his permission, we are bringing him in to the covenant of Avraham Avinu. And this, in a sense, is the, I'm sure maybe some of you have had experiences with non-religious people. I remember, just to share with you one small anecdote that happened to me many years ago when one of my sons, Shmuel, was learning in a yeshiva in Baltimore, in America. And he had to get he had an Israeli passport, he was born in Israel, and he had to get some official visa from the Israeli embassy. The Israeli embassy was in Washington, D.C. which was about an hour's drive from Baltimore. So we drove down there, and when we got there, it was closed. We hadn't paid too much attention to opening hours, and at the gate there was a guard, and this guard was about 6'4", and he built like a tank, and with a ponytail, and he was a sort of fellow you didn't particularly want to cross. I mean, he gave over this sort of feeling that he was like, don't mess with me. So we said, look, we've come such a long way. He says, look, I'm not interested. Come back again another day, which wouldn't have happened because I had to leave. Anyhow, to cut a long story short, at a certain point, we gave him the passport, and he looked at it and he said, oh, your name is Kimche. I said, yes. He said, oh, that's very interesting. The head of the department, the consular department in the embassy, is called Kimche. So I said, oh, she's probably not a relative, but it's an interesting. So he says, look, she'll be interested to meet somebody called Kimche. I'm going to let you through, but I'm only going to let your son through, not you. Okay, so to cut a long story short, for about an hour, I'm sitting alone with this completely, totally secular Israeli in this sort of guard cabin outside the embassy. His name was Guy, Gimel Yud, one of these really uninspiring modern Israeli languages, names given here in Israel. I hope I'm not offending anybody. I hope no one's got a kid or grandchild called Guy, but Guy is just one of those completely invented names. Anyhow, while he's standing there, he's like checking his phone every 3 or 4 minutes. So I said, what's going on? He says, my wife is due to give birth any moment, and I'm just monitoring what's happening. I said, oh, Mazel Tov, very nice. I said, yes, and it's a boy. I said, oh, very nice. So I said to him, what about a bris Mila? Oh, he said, I never thought of that. I never thought of a bris Mila. I'm not sure what entails a bris Mila. None of my friends had. He was part of the whole society of Israeli Yoredim who lived in Washington, businessmen, politicians. He says, I'm not sure my friends did bris Mila on their children, but it's quite a good idea. He says to me, I'm not sure how to do it though. Anyhow, to cut a long story short, I said to him, look, give me your phone number. I'm going back to Baltimore. I'll make sure that a moil contacts you, and the moil will come from Baltimore to Washington and do the bris Mila, and it'll be fun. And that's what happened. This baby got a bris Mila only because we were delayed in coming to the embassy, and this Israeli who was completely, I would say, oblivious to the importance of bris Mila. But when I mentioned the word Brit Milah, somewhere deep in his mind, there was a pressed a button. They pressed a button. They said, "Yes, maybe this is something worth doing. You know, it might be a good idea. I have heard of it," but he had absolutely no intention of doing it at all. But I sent him a very nice moil from Baltimore, who was also a qualified doctor and who did the bris for him. And there it is. You know, sometimes you meet people for a reason you don't even realize why you meet them. But somewhere there's running around a young Israeli man in his 20s with a bris Milah only because we got stuck outside the Israeli embassy, and I was chatting to Guy. He was happy to have someone to chat to in Ivrit. Most people, he's breaking his teeth over English. So because we were chatting together, and we organized a moil for him, and that was he obviously had zechus over somewhere along the line, some sort of zechus, which some sort of merit that his child should have a bris Milah. But I think in general, even non-religious people understand the importance of the bris Milah, even though it's not reasonable and it's not rational. But the Torah is telling us that it's the key to the uniqueness of the Jewish people. For some reason, that is the key. The Hayei Tomim, that enables us in some way to give birth to children who have an innate Kadusha. The innate Kadusha of your child is connected somehow to the Kadusha of the bris Milah. That is the way the Torah teaches us, and that is something which, as I say every Shia in this course, in Sefer Bereshis, these are the foundations which are laid, which make it possible going forward for Klal Yisrael to exist. Let's come back to the text just for a minute. Okay, at this point, excuse me. At this point, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Abraham something else. He says, not only are you going to have a bris milah, but I'm changing your name. This is also a critical moment in Avram's life, in chapter 17. Have a look at the highlighted pasuk. V'lo yikorei od es shimcha Avram. No longer will you be called Avram, v'heyeh shimcha Avraham. Right? We're adding the letter Hey. Ki av hamon goyim nesaticha. That's a very interesting thing. That in a sense, a double message here in this pasuk. On the one hand, you are going to be the father of a goy gadol, of a unique nation, the descendants of Yitzkop. On the other hand, your role in Jewish history is to be an av hamon goyim, that your influence will be spread over all the nations of the world. That in some way, Avram, and as I mentioned to you last week, that's why Avram is seen to be the father of every ger and giores is ben Avram and bas Avram, because the teachings of Avraham spread out across the whole world. I think I mentioned to you before, in Rabbi Sachs's books, he often refers to the Abrahamic religions, right? By which he means Islam and Christianity and Judaism have all this in common, even though, of course, we have much more not in common than we have in common. But one thing we have in common is that we trace our spiritual ancestry back to Avraham Avinu. And that's why he calls them Abrahamic religions. And in our generation, the politicians have decided to call one of the peace treaties is called, what does he call it? The
Abrahamic Accords.
Abrahamic Accords, that's right. The Abrahamic Accords were some of the peace agreements that Bibi hammered out with various Arab states. The Abrahamic, what's the thinking behind that? That indeed we have this, despite all our differences, theological and national and political differences, we do have a common denominator. And what is the common denominator? Avraham. So Avram gets a letter Hey, and incidentally, this is the source of the minhag that we have of giving a child a name at the bris milah. There's no real reason to give a child a name at the bris milah. You could give the boy a name when he's born, but we wait for the bris milah in order to, in a sense, reenact what happened to Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu, at the day that he got the bris milah, he also got a new name. He was changed from Avram to Avraham. And there's an interesting thing I want to mention to you about this, that the Kli Yakar, some of you are familiar with the commentary on the Torah, the Kli Yakar, one of the most amazing commentaries on the Chumash, very beautiful, very profound. The Kli Yakar was a Talmud of the Maharal of Prague. So Kli Yakar is writing in Prague about 400 years ago, and his commentary on the Chumash is magnificent. And what he does is sometimes he brings in, just sort of in passing, he brings in more Kabbalistic and mystical ideas. And here on this occasion, he speaks about that the Mekubalim take the view that there's something about the letter Hey, the fifth letter of the alphabet, right? Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet, Hey. The letter Hey, there's something about the letter Hey which is connected to childbirth. Right? And you'll find in the Hasidic world, you'll find that most of the Hasidim are very particular to give their girls a name which has a letter Hey in it, right? The letter Hey, should be somewhere. A name like Chana or Shoshana, or names which have a letter Hey in them are mystically connected to the ability to have children. And the origin of that is also this pasuk, that Avram and Sarai, both of them were barren, had no children. They were both elderly. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised them to have a child. And in order to make that happen, he gave each of them the letter Hey. Avram became Avraham, and Sarai became Sarah. And the letter Hey was seen by the Mekubalim as the key to this whole story. Exactly why and in what way the letter Hey affects these things, for that you need to ask your local Kabbalist and see if you can find someone who gives you a good example. I asked somebody once, and he said, can't you see, he says, do you know how the letter Hey is written in the Sefer Torah, right? So I know how it's written. The letter Hey is written with a dalad, right? And then inside the dalad is a little upside down yud. That's how the letter Hey is written. So he says, the upside down yud is the fetus that is upside down inside the pregnant mother. That's the little yud, which is upside down. Why is it upside down? It could be the right way up. It's upside down because it represents, the dalad represents, if you like, the mother, and the little yud, which is upside down, is hanging there, so to speak, in suspension. It's suspended, right? But why is it an upside down yud? Because that is the fetus. Okay, I'm afraid I can't really explain this to you more rationally than that. But the idea is that the letter Hey is seen to have an important connection to fertility and procreation, and we get it from here. Interestingly, the Medrash says that Yitzchak is born largely in the zechus of Sarah Imenu, that it was Sarah who davens intensely for a child, because Avram already had a child. And if you see from the text, Avram had a child, Yishmael, even though he wasn't thrilled with Yishmael, but he already felt that he had a continuation into the next generation through Yishmael. But Sarah was absolutely convinced that Yishmael was no good, and that they needed to have a child through her, and she davens. And symbolically, it's very interesting. The Medrash says that what happened is that Sarai is written Sin Resh Yud. So she loses her Yud, but that Yud, as you know, has a gematria value of 10, and that's divided up into twice Hey. In other words, the Hey in the name of Sarah and the Hey in the name of Avram came from Sarai's Yud. That Yud was divided up, each of them got half of it, and that was, in some way, mystically, the mechanism by which the names were transformed. And so it wasn't anymore Avram and Sarai without any Heys at all. The Yud split into two Heys, right? And by splitting into two Heys, it became possible for them to give birth. And I've heard all sorts of attempted, interesting discussions about the splitting of the Yud into two Heys in connection with the splitting of the chromosomes in order to in order to create a new baby, how the chromosomes split and create exact copies of each other. Right, the two Heys are two copies of each other split out of the Yud, and that creates the next generation. There's a lot of very interesting mystical information here, which I'm not going to go into at such great length because I'm not really qualified to do so. But when you next find yourself sitting on the bus next to your local Kabbalist, make sure that you ask him this question. You ask him, can you explain to me, please, what the letter Hey has to do with procreation? But this is part of the story in Bereshis chapter 17. So I'm sure you're already getting a bit of a feel. This Bereshis chapter 17 is a very multi-layered story. It's about the Kadusha of the conception of Yitzchak. Let's now have a look in the last quarter of an hour of the Shia. Let's see if we can have a look a little bit at the name Yitzchak. I must tell you, the name Yitzchak, when you first see it and think about it, is a bit strange. Because Yitzchak means what? What does Yitzchak mean, ladies and gentlemen? What does Yitzchak mean?
Is it laughter?
Laughter. He will laugh. Okay, why would we name somebody of great Kadusha, one of the holiest men in the whole of Sefer Bereshis, why would we call him laughter? He will laugh. What's there to laugh about? Is it meant to be a joke? Or what is this laughter? What is it? Why call him Yitzkop? Why call him Yitzkop? Okay, so we're going to have a look at that closely, but I just want to tell you, I might have mentioned this before, I don't remember, that Rashi here has got a very interesting, simple. Are there any Yitzchoks here in the Shia? Anybody here a Yitzchok? I'm just looking through the screen. I can't see any obvious Yitzchoks. Well, you never know with people's English names and Hebrew names. I don't know what is Henry in Hebrew, Henry Israel? What is Henry?
Chaim ben Yitzchok.
Chaim ben Yitzchok. Okay, so I was close. Chaim ben Yitzchok. So let me tell you what Rashi says, Rashi's first attempt. Of course, there are lots of layers of meaning of the name Yitzchok. Chaim ben Yitzchok, there we go. That Rashi says that Yitzchok means as follows, that Yud is a reference to the 10 nisyonos of Abraham Avinu, that he was tested 10 times and he passed all the tests, and the Mila is one of them, right? Tzadi is 90, was the age of sorrow when Yitzchok was born. That's how old his mother was. Ches is 8, is the 8 days, the bris Mila. He was the first person in the world to get the bris Mila on the 8th day, that's the Ches. And Kuf was the age of Avraham when Yitzchok was born, right? In chapter 17, the one we're reading at the moment, Avram is 99 years old. And he's told, have the bris Mila, and next year you'll have a baby. So next year he's 100, right? Sarah is 90, because we know she's 10 years younger. So that the Kuf is Avram, the Tzadi is Sarah, the Ches is the bris Mila, and the Yud is the Asara Nisyonos. And that's the name Yitzchak. That's Rashi. That's Rashi in the end of Lech Lecha. Very, very simple, but very profound. Very profound. The coded in to this name is a reference to all the, shall we say, the spiritual ingredients that went in to creating this remarkable individual of Yitzchak. So Henry, there you've got it, a new appreciation of your father's name. Chaim ben Yitzchak. Next time you say Chaim ben Yitzchak, you can tell your family, let me tell you something about Yitzchak. Yud Tzadi, Ches Kuf, right? These are all great qualities of Yitzchak, and all emphasize the miraculous nature of the way Yitzchak came into this world. But let's have a look for a moment at Yitzchak meaning to laugh. Let's have a look here. I think I brought something down here. Second. Okay, so here he says, "Vayomel Elokim el Avram, sorrow will no longer be called sorrow, Sorai shall be called sorrow." Right? This is all in our chapter. This chapter 17 is mega. Right? Uberachti osar gamasati menabein, and she will have a child herself. Right? And what is the response here? Look at this. Immediately after he hears this, what the pasuk says, Vayipol Avram al Ponov Vayitzchak. Avram fell on his face when he heard this news, and he laughed. So the name Yitzchak at one level describes Avram's initial response, right, to this news. In other words, imagine he's 99 years old. His whole life he's been dreaming of establishing a family and descendants and a nation. When he was 75, in the opening pasuk of Lech Lecha, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to him, that I will make you a great name and make you into a great nation. And incidentally, coming back to the letter Hey just for a minute, the Mefarshim say, what does it mean? Why Agad Lo? It should be Va'agadeil Shemecha. I will make your name great. What's the Gad Lo? So they say the Gad Lo means I will give you the letter Hey. I will give you the letter Hey in its full strength, and through that you will have a great nation. Anyway, I call upon him, he laughs. And then in the next pasuk, Vayomer Elokim, Baruch Hu says to Avraham Avinu, Sarah Ishtacha, your wife Sarah will have a baby, but Karos as Shemo Yitzchak. Now, this is one of the rare occasions in the Torah where the parents actually did not have a look in on naming the child. Yitzchak is named by God. Yitzchak is not named by Avram and Sarah. I'm giving you this child's name, and you should call him Yitzchak. And with him, he will continue the covenants that I'm making with you. So Yitzchak, so it means, so have a look here in the Ramban, I think. Did I bring you the Ramban? Oh, so let's have a look at Rashi just for a minute. We've only got a few minutes left. Let's have a look at Rashi. Avram starts laughing. Ze tirgem taf aleph in Rashi means targum unkos. Loshoin simcha v'chadi. V'chadi. Right? Targum unkos translates this laughter as the word chadi. Chadi, chet dalad yud in Aramaic, is actually derived from the Hebrew word chedva, right? That we under the chuppah, right? Ava, achva, the Mishmach should give the chosn and kala chedva. Chedva means happiness, right? That's what chedva means. Chet dalad vav. So chadi is loshen simcha. So he's laughing for joy. He's laughing. That's how Targum Rashi picks up Targum Onkelos. Interestingly, Sarah also laughs, but her laugh is a laugh of disbelief. Right? So says the Ramban here, he says, and this is life, says the Ramban, that this is interesting, that what? Laughter, Pam Yoma Lelad. Sometimes laughter, you're laughing about something because it's ridiculous, because it's so improbable as to be funny, right? That something like this can happen. It's just it's laughable. When in English you say about something that it's laughable, you're saying that it's incredible in the real sense of the word incredible. It can't be believed. But pa'am la simcha. But sometimes the word tzechoik is for simcha, is for joy, right? So part of Yitzchak, so says the Ramban, let's have a look at the Ramban here very nicely. Olofi daiti, shakavona beloshon hazeh. The meaning why HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave this name, ki kol roe inyon nifla ba'oda, letovlo, anybody who has an amazing sort of windfall, an amazing moment of great achievement, Yismach, he will be so happy, ad yimolei sechot piv, so much so that he will laugh. He will laugh. You hear that you've achieved something great. It's a moment of simcha. It's a moment of laughter and smiling in the sense of rejoicing. And this is actually Vahu Masha Omra Sarah. Later on, when Yitzchak is born, Sarah says, Tzachok osali elikim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has made out of me tzachok. Now, in modern Hebrew, tzachok really only means the negative, right? Making tzachok means to laugh at something, to ridicule it. But in classical Hebrew, it doesn't always mean that. Tzachok, says the Ramban, can mean joy. It can mean laughter of joy. And that's what Sarah says, tzachok osali elikim, later on in chapter 21, which we'll look at later on. So he says here, Kol hashomeya yitzachak. Anybody who hears that at the age of 90, and my husband is 100, we had this child, they'll laugh. They'll laugh because it's impossible, and they'll laugh because of the wonderful news. Right? The Shir Hamalas that we say before benching, so we speak about B'shuv Hashem as Shibas Tzion. So it's interesting. The Ramban makes this comparison, which is, I think, relevant to us today, to you and me, right? He says the laughter of Yitzchak is similar to the laughter mentioned in this Shir Hamalas. What's the Shir Hamalas about? The Shir Malos is about our generation. Beshuv Hashem, Shiv Tziyah, right? When Klal Yisrael eventually returned to the land of Israel, Shivat Zion, Hayina Kecholmin, it'll be like a dream. You won't actually believe that it's happened after thousands of years of Galus, right? And what will happen? Oz Yimolei Sechot Pinu. We will rejoice. We will rejoice. If anybody asks you why you are rejoicing and living in Israel or celebrating, I don't know, Yom Yerushalayim, you can tell them it's a pasuk. Oz Yimolei Sechot Pinu. Ulshanenu Rino is a pasuk in Tehillim which speaks about when you see something happening which doesn't make sense, like the establishment of Medinat Israel. And it's completely incredible, goes against all logic and all predictions and all anything that we've ever understood, and suddenly it's there and it's magnificent. That is Yitzkop. So really, by giving the name Yitzhak, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying to Avraham Avinu, the future of the Jewish people is all really supernatural. It's all laughable in the sense that nobody can predict it. Nobody could understand it. Nobody can really understand how it is, the way it is. It's something we can laugh at. And we laugh about it not out of disbelief. We laugh about it out of pure joy. Oz Yimolei Sechot Pinu. Then, when Klal Yisrael come back to the land of Israel, then Yimalei Sechot Pinu. Then our mouths will be full of laughter. Right? There's a similarity in the Hebrew language between tzchok and sichok. Sichok and tzchok are closely connected. They both mean laughter, slightly different nuances. But really, this is what the Ramban is saying. That Yitzchak gets this name as a prediction that everything about the future of the Jewish people will be incredible, will be something that observers will find hard to believe has happened and will happen. And we have seen all this in our generation, ladies and gentlemen. We have seen in our generation, the tzchok of Yitzchak comes back again and again in our generation, and it's something to be celebrated. Okay, Rabbi Sai, it's already 11:15. I'm going to sign off for today. It's always nice to see you this morning. I hope you've enjoyed the Shia. Yitzchak, what is Yitzchak? What is the letter Hey? What was going through Avram's mind? And the way in which the Bris Mila symbolizes really the unique destiny of Klal Yisrael, which doesn't follow any paths of logic or predictability, is something which is completely lamala min ateva, and that is the meaning of the word Yitzchak, to laugh in disbelief. That's an idea. In disbelief that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us such a wonderful gift. That's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. Nice to see you all.
Yes,
nice to see you, Malcolm, and Henry, and George.
Thank you very much.
A great pleasure. Nice to see you, Debbie. Nice to see all of you. Thank you again, Michael Gross, for your sponsorship.